Hey, good Monday morning, everybody. BAM weather meteorologist Brett Waltz here, giving you a long-range forecast update. And guys, today I've got a little bit of something for everyone. We've got snow in the short term. We've got record-breaking cold. We've got a big warm-up on the way as we work through the middle part of the month. We've got a very active storm track as we head all the way through the end of the week 2 time frame. And then we've still got this transition that we've been watching for quite some time now, late November, early December, and what could potentially kick off one of the more interesting patterns for cold and snow for the month of December that we've seen in quite some time. And we will talk about all that as we go throughout today's video. But I do want to start in the short term with the snow that's ongoing right now. And guys, this is actually a lobe of the polar vortex that has dove all the way south into the Ohio Valley and the Great Lakes today. Very unusual for this time of the year, and it's wrapping in very, very cold air. And as you can see, a lot of snow across the Ohio River Valley as we go throughout the day today. We also continue to see lake effect influences up here further to the north across parts of the Chicago metro area. There will be more into western Michigan and northwest Indiana. You can also see kind of this upper level low swinging around parts of the northeast, leading to some heavier snow across parts of western New York. Lake effect in Ohio as well. This will continue to linger, and this lake effect machine will continue as we continue over the next couple of days. In terms of the cold, I want to continue to highlight this because certainly, especially down into the deep south and into Florida, dealing with record-breaking cold lows into tomorrow morning. Temperatures down into the lower 20s across Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia. We've got below freezing temperatures into northern and central parts of Florida. We've got record-breaking cold lows all the way down to Miami and the Florida Keys, getting into the 40s and 50s down there. So just a substantial blast of colder air. It's not going to linger super long, though. You can see for the eastern part of the country, temperatures continue to run pretty chilly as we work into Wednesday morning. But by the time we work into Thursday and into Friday morning, we're actually looking Friday and into Saturday at some record-breaking warm lows for the central part of the country. We take a look at high temperatures in here. By the weekend, you can see Friday and into your Saturday, we're talking about temperatures 60s and 70s all the way back up into Iowa, southern Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana. So a much warmer pattern on the way following this brief snap of very cold weather as we close out this week and as we work really through next week as well. Because if you look at the pattern, next 2 weeks, you can see next 7 days, we average out cooler than normal because of the cold in the short term. But look at the warmth building across the central and western part of the country. As we pick up this stormier pattern into this week 2 time frame, the 17th to the 23rd, core of the warmer air will shift further off to the east. And I think above normal temperatures from the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, the Great Lakes, and down across the southeastern part of the country. I do think cooler air starts to build in across the western half of the United States, and more seasonable conditions will continue in the northeast because of all of the warmth up there near Greenland and the Arctic. That is kind of suppressing some of the cooler air further down to the south. So even though the pattern is not all that favorable for cold air in the week 2 time period, in fact, it's favorable for warmth in the eastern half of the country, that blocking to the north keeps the northeast more seasonable rather than warming up in a notable fashion. Here was the outlook that we put out this time last week in terms of the mid-November pattern evolution. The 14th to the 18th there on the top, the 18th to the 23rd there on the bottom. Based off of the current guidance, I really have no change to this type of an idea. As we get late into this week and into next week, the pattern is going to be widespread warmer than normal across the central part of the country and into parts of the eastern U.S. The northeast, again, stays a little bit more seasonable to slightly cooler. And then with time, that warmth continues to bleed further to the east. Cooler air starts to build in across the western part of the country, and our very stormy pattern will persist out through the 23rd of the month. As we look at precipitation, here's the next 7 days. You can see late in this period, we start to bring more moisture opportunities into the southeast plains and up through parts of the Midwest and the Mississippi River regions. Again, this is the next 7 days in terms of total rainfall. And if we take a look at the pattern as we roll into the week 2 time frame, what you will see is this trough and these storm systems across the southwestern and the western U.S. That's going to lead to a mild flow of air and a moist flow of air across the central United States into the Midwest and the Ohio Valley. It's going to lead to numerous rainfall opportunities as we continue out through this time frame. And you can see by the end of the period, what starts to happen is we start to squash the more widespread warmth a little bit. I do agree with that. This is going to kick off a transitional period as we work into the last week of November. It's probably not going to snap to cold in just a day or two, like kind of what we're seeing right now. I think it's more of a step down process, and I think the last week of November is the start of that process, where we probably start the last week of November a little bit milder and progressively get cooler before maybe a bigger blast of cold air as we turn the month from November to December. As we warm things up in the week 2 time frame, and we have all those storm systems, you can see it's a very active pattern. This is the week 2% of normal precipitation look, central to the eastern part of the country, running much wetter than normal. As a whole, it's going to be an active period with a lot of storm systems that we're going to deal with. In terms of that last week of November, this was the outlook we put out last week. I really don't have a big reason to disagree with this type of an idea. As we noted here, it's a transitional period. There's going to be a storm system in here to kind of kick off this period, and we get progressively cooler with time. I don't think that this period features substantial cold, but I do think that we back down out of this milder pattern that we are getting into as we work into the middle part of November. I think the key here in terms of when we can get maybe bigger cold is what's going on with our tropical forcing, with our MJO forecast. If we take a look here, we've talked a lot about needing to get out of phases 6 and 7 and into phase 8 to get colder air. Well, we're stalling things out a little bit. That is a warmer risk to the forecast, and I think that it will lead to the tendency that any kind of more substantial cold will hold off until the turn of the month. However, you look at the latest EPS weekly data, it is getting into that much colder phase 8 state by the time we end the first week of December. And so, to get bigger cold, one of 2 things has to happen. Number 1, get into that colder MJO phase, or number 2, we need a big breakdown of the polar vortex. I see both of those things in motion right now, which I think combine into December to produce perhaps a more notable blast of colder air. If we take a look here, as we go through phase 7, if we were to completely stall out and not get into phase 8 at all into December, phase 7 still offers up cold across the northern part of the country. You can see here, there's definitely cold across this area with the phase 7 analog, but it would be milder across the central to southeastern part of the country. What we need to happen is to get into this phase 8, you get even more blocking, and you lead to more widespread cold across the United States in here as you get into MJO phase 8. And so there's still signs for that to happen into the first week of December. But let's say worst case scenario here, we stall out in phase 7. There's another method, I think, that is ongoing right now that is going to lead to a shift regardless. I think at this point, the MJO, as we get into December, may not matter as much as what is going on in the stratosphere. If we take a look at the stratospheric forecast as we roll things forward, we have a major warming event that's developing here across northern North America, near Alaska and Greenland. Now, initially, to end November, it does shove the coldest of the air over towards Asia. And it's why, again, I think the last week of November, it's a transitional period. It's a step-down process. It's probably not that cold. Cooler, yes. Notable cold, probably not for the last week of the month. However, this has bigger implications down the road into December. We can look here at these scenarios that have happened in the past. And this middle bottom chart is what I want to draw your attention to. This is what we call a North American warming event. When we've had that in the past, this next slide is going to show us what typically happens. You tend to get into December a lot of high pressure over Greenland, a lot of high pressure over the Arctic, and you start to get higher pressure and warmer air over Alaska. That allows for a more consistent bleed of colder air down across the United States. And so, in my opinion, regardless of the MJO, the stage is being set for this colder air to settle in more consistently as we head into the month of December. If we take a look at years that had something similar with the vortex in November, you have some blockbuster Decembers in here. 1983, 1989, 2000, and even more recent years like both 2005 and 2007 had some pretty big cold snaps in the month of December. In fact, if you take a look at the upper level pattern, what these tend to favor, number one, it does tend to favor a transition in the North Pacific. Down the road, this would favor into December what we call a negative EPO. A lot of high pressure, a lot of warmth over Alaska, shoveling cold air south into the United States. On top of that, you also tend to get what we call high latitude blocking, a negative NAO, a negative AO. That allows for a transport of cold air across the northern and the eastern part of the country. Here are the years that had a strong negative AO and negative NAO into December since 1990. Years like 2010 we've talked about, years like 2000 we've talked about quite a bit as of late. In terms of data, is there data support for this? There is. I think that the overnight GEFS maybe was a little bit too fast with this idea. It was trying to cool things down and build that negative EPO in by the end of week 2. I think that transition happens the last week of November. And as you can see here, the more widespread and the more consistent and notable cold air happens as we get into the first 2 weeks of December. This is a strong signal on the weekly data, and we've got a lot of pattern driver support for that idea as well. And if you really had to pick out a specific time frame, the EPS weekly really brings in more notable cold air right around December 1st. And there's also support for that from the North Pacific. There's a major storm system and a major trough in the North Pacific that would correlate to a big blast of cold air right around December 1st or 2nd. And so guys, bottom line here, I still think the last week of the month, we're transitioning from the mild mid-November to what will end up being a colder December. I think there's a big storm system, kind of similar to what we had late October, late November, that will usher in a more notable change to colder than normal temperatures, really across much of the U.S., but especially the northern and eastern part of the country. And I think that by the time we settle into the first week of December, it's a cold pattern, it's a snowy pattern, it's probably going to be one that is very busy in the cold and snow department with probably higher heating demand as well. And overall, that's kind of what we've been talking about for the past couple of weeks. I really don't have a substantial change in that idea, but we're just seeing more and more support for the idea. And if we can move that MJO along into phase 8, that would only increase the confidence. If we linger in phase 7, that is a slightly warmer risk to the forecast, but mainly across the southern and southeastern part of the country. Guys, that's all I have for today's update. If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you all for watching. Chat soon.